Welcome to the Dirty Side of Leadership podcast with Ron and Kristin, where leadership meets entertainment. This podcast features stories with names and certain aspects that have been changed to keep submissions private. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Dirty Side of Leadership podcast. Today's episode is remote work, the good, the bad, and the Wi-Fi ugly. There's a little play on that. Wi-Fi plays a huge role in remote work. We will dive into that. But I want to thank those of you who went and purchased our planner after the episode that aired just the other day. We saw a huge uptick in orders, and you are smart. You're getting it in right before the holidays, and you still have time. It's available on Amazon forward for the number 4 WARD planner.
High performance.
Find it there. High performance planner.
High performance planner.
Thank you. What would I do without you, Ron? Go and get yours today.
Yeah. And also for those of you that have purchased, reviews help a lot. I learned this, Kristin, when I wrote my book, that if someone purchases my book from Amazon, you get, of course, credit for a sale. But if someone who purchased the book from Amazon does a review, you get an additional, it's just like you sold an additional book. So that's how, that helped me get my numbers up.
Yes.
So that's very important. If people will review, look at it, and of course, 5-star.
Yeah, I mean,
we're not looking
this isn't optional.
We're not looking for 2-star.
Exactly. When we say review it, you know what we're saying here. But all right, excellent. But thank you for those who messaged me and said they picked it up. And then we also saw the orders come in. So thank you so much. So today we're diving into the exciting yet often perplexing world of remote work. Whether you're a seasoned remote worker or new to the game, this episode promises to be a roller coaster of humor, frustrations, upsides, downsides, and essential tips for navigating the remote work terrain.
Yeah, Kristin, this is going to be interesting because I had to make that adjustment. Even when I was working, they closed the academy. We had to do virtual training. All kinds of stuff was going on. And then I became an entrepreneur, and remote working was the new thing for me. So there's a lot of quirks and humorous aspects, as you've said. We will look at some of those, but you can say goodbye. The beauty of it is you can say goodbye to getting up early in the morning and trying to look your best. And a lot of people put a lot of pressure on themselves when they go into the office to really look good. You can put in those comfortable clothes. I like to wear a onesie when I'm doing.
You wearing one right now?
Listen, Kristin, there's some things that I refuse to answer, but
oh my goodness, smart.
I did. Man, it was so liberating for me. I wore a suit every day, and but tell me if you feel this way. There are days that I miss that. There are days that I miss dressing up. So sometimes I, depending on where I'm going or a meeting, I will probably overdress just a little bit.
Yeah, same.
So anyway, the other thing is you never know if you're doing Zoom meetings and other things that we're going to talk about, you never know when the camera might be on. Chris and I just laughed because we had a funny exchange. We've been talking like 15 minutes before we pushed record, and we said we should have just pushed record.
Yeah, we need to start saving it.
Yeah,
for
it was
podcast.
It was some funny stuff, but people may or may not remember. Well, you know what? You better cover this one, Kristin.
Okay.
You know how shy I am.
Well, yeah, so shy. So we all know that especially in the height of the pandemic, there were the no pants meetings, and a lot of people were exposed. They just had boxer shorts on, underwear, sometimes nothing, but they were business on top, nothing on bottom. And they would walk away forgetting that they hadn't committed to pants on that particular day. But you never know when your camera might accidentally turn on. But I have one. We all should remember this. I don't care what side of the political spectrum you're on. Jeffrey Toobin, he was a prominent writer, is a prominent writer and CNN chief legal analyst. He exposed his private parts, and let's just say it wasn't accidental. He took great pleasure in that Zoom call.
Oh my God.
He was fired by CNN, but get this, clearly it wasn't offensive enough because he was hired back within 8 months of the incident.
Okay. I'm, yeah.
What do you think about the lack of accountability there, though? It's like, oh my gosh, we're firing you. How dare you masturbate while we are on a Zoom call, but we're going to hire you back in 8 months. It's all a front.
Let's all be honest. Any other company would terminate you. I don't think they terminated. I think he was put on extended leave or
Probably.
something.
Yeah.
Probably stayed on the payroll. So, but yes, that's not the only. I saw a news report where everyone had to do homeschooling, and this little girl was online, and her mother forgot about it, and she's dressing in the background, so the teacher saw her. So it's something you really have to be aware of and pay attention and navigate. Sometimes you wonder, I've heard all kinds of things about from Siri to, the other devices in our home. I've talked about things and it pops up on my phone. So I don't know, but I think we can't get too relaxed when you're using social media, you're using cameras, you're using AI, all of these things. And also you have to make sure that you log out, that you turn it off. That's a whole other story, but there's been several people got caught saying things that they didn't want to say.
Yeah.
There's also all of these memes where there was one going around where this individual literally said they was on a 2-hour Zoom call and all they said was goodbye at the end of the call.
I've had plenty of those.
And Kristin and I, this is one of the things we were laughing about before. And she and I have this awkward moment as well. And if you've done Zoom or Teams, you're going to get this totally. You end the meeting, you're saying goodbye, especially if it's just two people, and you're trying to you have to click two buttons to get out of the call. So you're trying to be like, bye, and you're looking and you're trying to find the right spot. But
you look like an ass for like 30 seconds.
It's funny. It's uncomfortable.
Yeah, it is, right?
Sure.
So now I have
It's
to double
awkward.
click down. I'm like on it. Because
Kristin must have been practicing that. She
leaves
me like that.
I'm like, I'm not going to be the fool no mo. Yeah, no, I've got that down. Speaking of saying something when you didn't think others were going to hear you, and this is even before I was working remote, but this goes back like 15 years. And I believe I shared this story on a different episode, but it's too good not to go into it. Basically, we were on this regional conference call, and my assistant manager and I were both in the building, and we were taking the calls from our separate desks, which were like across the bank from each other. So I did not realize I was not muted. And when they were taking roll call of who was on the call, this is back before you could just, virtually see everybody. They said somebody's name, and he had ticked me off the prior week. And so I said, I was trying to talk to my assistant, not realizing I was not muted. And I said, so-and-so really pissed me off the other day. And then the person conducting the conference call goes, who was that? And I was like, oh my gosh. And so I muted it. Thankfully, my assistant goes, did you hear that guy? Apparently I sounded like a guy. And so the rest of the call, I made sure to talk really feminine and upbeat, because if she thought I was a guy, I was hoping everyone else did too. But so the rest of the call, like when they call me, I'd be like, hi guys. Okay. So just to offset. But and that's before remote work. That was merely a conference call. So the point is, we're human. We're going to make mistakes. Let's try to be as smart as we can and as careful as we can, especially when we're working remote. Even if it's hybrid and you're only working remote 2 or 3 days a week, you need to cue in on these things.
Kristin, I just remember this just out of humor, but Alexa made a noise I have Google Home downstairs, Alexa upstairs. Long story, but Alexa made a noise. I said, Alexa, are you spying on me? And she said, no, I'm designed not to spy on you. So I was like, yeah, a likely answer.
No, she's sending it to the CCP as we speak.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you've got Big Brother upstairs and downstairs. It's all over.
Kristin, I do.
Ron's going to pivot.
I'm going to pivot. I think it would be a great time, and I'm going to tell you why. I had someone come over to my house the other day, and I had my backdrop. And if you're watching on YouTube, we prefer you to listen. But if you're watching on YouTube, as you notice, Chris and I have similar backgrounds. Mine looks better, but we have similar
I think
backgrounds.
mine looks better, quite
And
frankly.
anyway, someone goes, "Oh my God, there's the infamous Dirty Side of Leadership neon sign." And mine is on styrofoam that I can move, because when I'm on podcasts, of course, I don't want to have this in the background. And Kristin has her own show. So we kind of had to do things mobile. But
Yeah.
Kristin, one of the first thing I'm going to say is a dedicated workspace. So I wanted you to talk a little bit about your workspace for those listeners that might be interested, or they may want to try something like that. And I'll mention a little more about mine.
Right. No, so I love it. So there's two things that I did. One was for the show. So I have my show and this podcast. I needed a studio, but the same thing could be built out if you need an actual dedicated workspace. So my dad and my husband actually worked together, and they framed out a studio in our garage. And we have a 2-car garage. It's nothing huge, but we were able to measure and make it work. It's pretty awesome. It does get cold in the winter and hot in the summer, but I opted to not worry about insulation or anything like that. But the whole point is, you can get creative and build something out and utilize, maybe you have an underutilized room. I have a room in our house we just call the Christmas tree room. It's the front room, and we just never go in there. That's what I utilized as my office when I was working remote. So we just turned the Christmas tree room into an office, and all was good there. But if you don't have that, you can get a she shed or a he shed, right? Like a little shed that they have them at Home Depot, put in your backyard.
She shed what?
You've never heard of a she shed?
I'm making a joke. It's a she said joke.
That's
Never
like
mind.
a big Pacific Northwest thing, but you just buy a shed. It can be your art studio. It can be your office. Put in your backyard. I was going to do that if the garage studio didn't work out. So far, so good with this.
There were times, though, Kristin, when you came on, you were either freezing or burning up. So before we recorded.
Yeah. And it's tough because the noise of the units pick up, so you can't have it running while you're recording. But when you're working remote, that's really not a huge issue.
It's interesting having this conversation, because just before Chris and I started recording, I had a builder here I used a sunroom for my studio, but it's kind of an eyesore. So I'm putting in very nice French doors. So the carpenter was here measuring and looking at things. We were discussing which door I was going to put, but I'm also wanting to do, and you guys can hold me accountable here, in January, February probably, I want to read The Dirty Side of Leadership and put it on Audible. And I've got a huge project list for winter and spring. So that's on the list. But I want to do a competition. If you are watching on YouTube, I want you to let us know who has the best backdrop, Kristin or me, and we'll post that on the Facebook group. We'll ask them. And listen, don't let her smile or anything taint your vote. I mean, you got to be legit. But
I think mine, because my bricks actually look like bricks.
What do you mean? What? These are real bricks. What are you talking about, Kristin?
Yeah.
You're going to huff and puff and blow my...
Yours looks like an insane asylum wall where it's padded. You can just slam your head into it and you'd be okay.
Kristin, what happened? We were supposed to be doing a podcast.
Padded walls. This is the behind the scenes before the recording type of
Yes,
banter.
it is. And I apologize in advance. So back to seriousness. You want to establish a dedicated workspace. And here's the problem. I mentioned this one other time, or either in a leadership program, is if you do not have a dedicated workspace, and I get you need to move around some as I go to a coffee shop some, but if you don't have a dedicated workspace, it's hard to separate your life, your home life, with your work life.
Yeah.
So if you have a dedicated workspace, it's psychologically you're going to work. But if you're on the couch and you're sitting there, even if you set your laptop down beside the couch, there's no break in that, and no one can work all the time. So you want to set it up in a way that you can take breaks and you're leaving your workstation, so forth and so on. Any thoughts on that, Kristin?
Yeah, definitely. So before I started using the Christmas tree room as my office when I was working remote, I had a small corner desk in the master bedroom. And that was a bad idea because one, it was just too small, but two, when you're in your room, that your bedroom should be like a safe haven, like a special place that you keep neat and clean, and it serves a purpose. I highly recommend not working in your bedroom, because what happens is you're spending 10 hours a day working in the room. And then at night, let me just tell you, it'll kill your sex life if your office is also your bedroom, because you want to be so far from that place when your shift is done. So the thought of spending any more time in that room than needed is not appealing. So that's a real thing. Don't work from your bedroom.
I told you the Dirty Side of Leadership podcast would be informative.
Yeah. I mean, it's the truth. That is A+ advice coming from someone who actually used to work in their bedroom. And then I'd go on a call and forget to blur my background. And now everyone has seen what my bedroom looks like, right? It's just too personal.
It is. It really is. Moving right along. Another thing is set a consistent schedule. This is a challenge for anyone working from home. Now, there are people that work for companies. There's accountability. They know when you log on. They know when you log off. Some people have gotten good at putting a bottle on the keyboard so it looks like they're working. There's all kinds of tricks that I've heard people doing, but a schedule is very important. The variance in my schedule is, like I said, if I go to a coffee shop, which I did this morning, but for me, it gets very monotonous if I'm sitting here working, and I don't know why I like that hustle and bustle and people walking in. So I do that sometimes, but yes, you want to have a consistent schedule. It's so important. Start early, take your breaks, and it'll go a lot better for you.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Kristin, this one, again, I credit what you said about your mother. You can take it, but that airport stuck with me like crazy. And now I'm glued to how people dress, but you take it away.
Yeah. So what I had shared a few episodes ago was that my mom always told me, because there's people that dress when they travel and they're going to the airport, they just dress like trash, pajamas, sweatpants, yoga pants. Hell yeah, that's more comfortable. But my mom said, everyone that you can see can also see you. And when you think about it that way, I always talk about an airport as being one of the best places to people watch. Well, they can all see you too. So if you're there in your pajamas with your hair thrown up in a messy bun and you're looking like crap, everyone sees that. And a lot of people travel. I have met so many people at the airport. I've made new relationships at the airport, on the airplane. So I highly suggest taking my mom's advice and dressing nicely when you travel.
This is a psychological thing, but I mentioned this, Kristin, that I wear a sport jacket. Now, I learned when I fly out west, a lot of times it may be July, but it's cold on a plane. So I've always got something to throw over me. But I'm telling you, you will get more respect in airports from the airport staff to just the general public if you're dressed nice at an airport, and psychologically people see you as important.
Right.
And whether right or wrong, it's just the truth. I've had several things happen where I just got treated with more respect because I was dressed.
Yeah. I have to tell you guys a little airport story. I don't know if I even told you this, Ron. We just went to Florida and we were bringing all our bags, right? We get dropped off. My dad drops us off outside. And I had brought my laptop bag, which I don't generally bring with me when I travel. And it was over my shoulder. And the reason that matters is, in my mind, I thought I had my handbag, my purse. And so we get out of the car and I'm immediately going for my ID. And I didn't have my entire purse on me. And we had just gotten dropped off at the airport. So my husband gave me a really hard time. He was very frustrated with me. And I was so impressed. I'm sharing this because it's a story of resilience, but then also had to do with the airport. So I thought I'd throw it in there. I said, you guys go ahead. My dad drove to my house and drove back, got me my purse in 41 minutes. That was amazing. It was a miracle. But I had already mentally been at peace with the fact that, you know what? I might not be flying out today. This is my fault. won't happen again. Sometimes you learn the hard way. And I was very peaceful at mind with it. I don't know how I did that because most people would be really stressed out. But I was dressed nicely that day. And when I first inquired while I was waiting for my dad to come back, just in case he wasn't there in time, I had inquired with the airline, and they were very respectful of me, and they were going to start the process of getting me cleared through TSA without a driver's license. And I truly feel that if I was dressed like a scuzz bucket, that I wouldn't have been treated that same way. And so it really does come full circle. Maybe some would say it shouldn't be like that, but the fact of the matter is it matters what you look like. So everything worked out well. My dad got me my ID and I went and didn't even have to run. So don't do that.
So the moral of the story is, even if you're inept, dress well. Correct.
Even if you're inept, dress well. Yeah, no, it took my husband like 3 hours to not be ticked at me. And yeah, so I won't do that again. But the whole story is, I really don't think that, I was allowed to go through the employee line too. I didn't have to go through regular security. They let me go through the employee line, which there was only like one person in front of me versus like 300.
Yeah.
And again, if I was in sweatpants and a t-shirt or my booty hanging out, a booty shorts, you think that they would have done that? I don't think so.
I don't think they would have. I think that's a great story. I honestly could top that. I've made every mistake. Chris and I have been open about, we share that we're not naturally organized. So I have a travel system. I really do. And the funny thing is I conduct a search of the room, like a police search, before I leave a hotel room. Because after I left 2 or 3 chargers and a book I was reading was on the covers, those kind of things, I'm like, this is not going to happen anymore. So I have a whole travel system, even my backpack, of where things are located, because you don't want to be, the overhead baggage. You're trying to get your earbuds and you don't know where they are and all that stuff. So I'm a big believer in systems and to keep you organized. So what you did is, you're used to carrying your purse, you changed your system.
Right.
And that's what threw you off.
Exactly.
When I coach new leaders, I go, what's your systems? How do you stay organized?
Right.
The next one is effective communication. And you don't want to go too overboard, but you want to over communicate with your team. In a volatile time, we talk a lot about the lockdown, but I had people that moved from all over the United States to Charleston. Some of them were newly in Charleston. So I certainly wanted to stay in touch with them, but you owe it to your team, especially if you're a manager leader, to let them know where you are. Keep your calendar up to date. Be prompt on your emails. Check in with people. Be available if at all possible, and try to get some FaceTime with your employees. And if you're an employee, try to get some FaceTime with your superiors. It's very important. FaceTime is much more effective than just talking on the phone. So try to make that happen. Maybe over communicate with your staff.
Right. Yeah, I would say I definitely did, especially when remote. I was like, okay, I'm going to be doing this from this time to this time. And they knew where I was. And it is that much more important when you are working remote. Something else, meeting etiquette. It means a lot when you're in person. Also, there's always that person at the end, and they throw you off by 30, 40 minutes because they ask a question that really only pertains to a very small percentage of the people in their room. And then there's people that can, say, hey, I want to one-off with you because this really only has to do with me and you, and the rest of the people in the room don't need to hear the answer. But that's meeting etiquette when you're actually mindful of if it's a value add to the majority of the people in the room. When you're virtual, you want to be on time, mute your microphone when you're not speaking, use the video when appropriate, pay attention, contribute, and avoid multitasking during meetings. Those are some really basic things to do. But, I when I was working remote and even before that, it was like when people still couldn't figure out that they were talking while on mute, I'm just like, man, get your shit together. Like, it's so funny. It's been a meme for 20, 30 years. You're still having this issue where you're talking on mute. And now you have to, oh, sorry, I was muted. Come on, right? It's like so obnoxious. And that just means that they were multitasking and not paying attention to that. So just be mindful. No one wants to hear you give an excuse after excuse on why they couldn't hear you when you were called upon.
Yeah.
Drives
Kristin, I
me
want your
absolutely
opinion
nuts.
on this. I had a
Yeah.
situation I required, because we did one major all staff meeting, and then I would do other virtual meetings with the team that I needed. But I had one and I said, I want everyone to be on camera. It was very controversial. Some people got upset. Listen to me. You are working. You do not have a right not to show your face. So I know
Exactly.
that's controversial. I know there's people even listening, you may disagree with that. And some, one of the things said was it's harder for women to get ready than it is men. Well, you can't say that when you come to work. You need to think of virtual work as work.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean there's a whole new set of rules. Now, there are instances like we've talked about where you may get to dress down. You may have a manager that's not going to require you to dress up, but the bottom line is it's work. And I guarantee you one thing that's interesting to me, and you guys can send us messages if you agree or disagree. It's so interesting to me. The people who did not want to come on camera were the people who had already caused problems even when we were
Bingo.
working on the campus. So I think the attitude, that was just another way for them to get that little dig in and be unprofessional or be a problem. So I'd be curious to hear even what our listeners think about that.
Yeah.
Should you have to show your face? Now, if you do a meeting all the time, I don't know, but I required it.
So we talked about this, oh my gosh, early on. And I had set the expectation for my team, which it sounds like you did as well. So I said, our Friday team call, it's cameras on. And everyone knew in advance there was no excuse, right? And it's a form of accountability, but it's also, you want to be able to see someone's expression on their face, how they react to something. You want to see that they're focused, and it shouldn't be controversial. It shouldn't be. They're just looking to dink around while you're talking, as long as the expectation is set. Now, if it's just, hey, we're having a call and, oh, yep, I need you to turn your camera on, I get how that could be something, but I'm assuming that's not what you did, Ron.
No. This was just a general, I wanted everyone to see everyone. We were in volatile times. I considered it work, and you're not going to sit there with your camera off.
Yeah. Lazy schleps. That's
exactly.
the problem. Yep.
Also, task and time management. I'm going to be brief on this, but time management, I teach in number one, as I teach, don't use the word meeting all the time. Sometimes you can say a get together, and it doesn't have to be an hour. Do not buy into that. There was a study done, and they did a 38-minute meeting. And if the manager is prompt and efficient, the meeting lasted 38 minutes. So we get these things locked in our brain that a meeting has to be an hour or it's just not a successful meeting. Your team will love you if you set that meeting for 30 minutes, 35 minutes, 40 minutes, and you keep everybody moving. You can get a lot done in that length of time. But if you do set it for an hour, don't run over. If someone else keeps talking and they need some of your time, go into a breakout room or end the call and call them back. Other people should not have to suffer through the conversation of one person who's asking those additional questions at 59 and a half minutes.
Right.
So stick with your time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Also, and I'll touch on two things, Kristin, because this is interesting. Keep in mind, I'm excited. I've released my book, and I get hired to do my very first training as a civilian, no longer working for the government. So I did a practice run, all of that, but I've got 3 screens, and I was not that great on, I wanted them to see my PowerPoint, but I was putting the PowerPoint on this large screen next to me that I could glance at if I needed it. Now, this is material I developed, so it's not like, there's something I had memorized. Some of this I developed even the week before. So I go on, they couldn't see it. Now, I'd never been in that type of a position where I'm getting paid to provide training. I don't remember, it's probably 30 or 40 people, and they can't see something that I'm referencing. And I finally, I did what you did at the airport, but I was faking it. I was sweating bullets, but I tried to look cool and calm. And as you know, I've got a neighbor who's a tech whiz, Lisa. I'm texting her to come over. And, but by the time she got here, I figured it out. There was a way that I could do it, and I made it through. But it is so important to be knowledgeable on your tech equipment, to understand Zooms, to understand. And I've got one exercise that requires breakout rooms. And when you're going to do that type stuff, you have to be very professional.
Oh, yeah.
So I'll put those two together on have your tech knowledge in check, your time management. And the other thing I learned, and Kristin knows this, that I was under the weather and had to conduct training just a few weeks ago. And this was a 4-hour training. So if you're doing live or you're doing virtual, always take breaks. Some people think if it's virtual, you don't need to take a break. Take a break. Always silence your microphone, because if you're partnered up with Kristin and you leave your microphone on and you run to the restroom and you live alone and the door's open, she's going to let you know that she heard you when you come back. That's a hypothetical situation. I'm not saying it happened, but
oh my gosh, I forgot about that.
And then finally, apparently I didn't limit distractions.
That was episode 1.
It really was. It was. And your producer from your show, we now have a different producer, but he was there.
Oh my gosh.
I knew what I was in for. When she brought that up with her producer on the call or on the program, I was like, well, that's what I signed up for. I wanted this co-host.
I lack tact when it comes to something.
I kind of loved it. I was kind of embarrassed. Then you start to wonder.
Time you drank sparkling water and I could hear the bubbles coming up your throat.
That was the same. No, that was the same time.
The same episode.
So I was like, my goodness,
I'm surprised you made it to number 2.
I am going to be on my toes with her. That's for sure.
Yeah. I don't miss a beat.
Finally, I'll move on, but limit distractions. If you're looking around, especially if you're on a Zoom call, people are going to be wondering what you're looking at. So you just got to limit that stuff, create a quiet workspace. And it is interesting, but we keep talking about the lockdown, but there were some people, their kids are running around and all that, and parents were in a bind. I shared some grace during that time period because everybody was thrown into it. But in general, you got to have your house in order in your Zoom and Teams calls.
I remember being on a conference call when everyone was first working remote, and this manager who's pretty high up, he and I got along great, but he was like, I'm working from an ironing board. That was his desk, because he used one of those standing, like stand desks, and he would just stand all day long. That's
good for him.
You saw that often. That's a very Pacific Northwest thing. People stand all day.
Oh, I had to order almost my whole staff. Yeah, we had someone with a back issue. And then someone else saw it. Trust me, the stand-up desk. I'm very familiar.
Yeah, the stand-up desk. So he was using an ironing board at home for his stand-up desk for a while, because that was something. It's like, you need a work-from-home office, but we're not going to give you a budget towards it. So figure it out, folks. So that was another thing that people were scrambling to figure out what resources they had laying around to use. And you have to magically find space in a home that you didn't purchase thinking I'm working remote, right?
Yeah.
So something else that's really important is security awareness. So you want to make sure to follow your company's security policies and use secure connections and tools when handling sensitive information. So that's very important. Be cautious about sharing confidential data in virtual meetings or chats, especially, I know, Ron, you mentioned sometimes you're working out of a coffee shop. And so most people would be wise enough to, obviously you're not dealing with sensitive information anymore, but if you are and you're working remote in a public place, make sure your screen is not visible to those around you. Make sure you're wearing headphones so people cannot hear what others are saying. Just be really mindful of all that. And the other piece is, you should be collaborating effectively, even though you're virtual. So you want to use collaboration tools like project management software, file sharing platforms, and communication apps. I know we used Microsoft Teams, and so it had that IM functionality, and we used that constantly. There's so many chat abilities out there. So just make sure that you are effectively collaborating using the tools that you have. And if you don't know what tools you have, you need to ask and be aware of them.
And Kristin, as you know, we use Google Drive. We start building our podcasts,
Yes.
and Kristin can put her thoughts. I put my thoughts. That's how we, build our podcasts, and it makes it very convenient for us to do that. Next is professional development. Continue to learn and grow in your role. Seek opportunities for skill development in virtual workshops. Stay updated on industry trends. And I'm going to tell you something. There were a few people who stood out on my radar who were taking the initiative and showing other people how to go into a breakout room, or showing them a certain app that we already had approved with the government. And those people began to move up in my eyes. They used that virtual time to elevate themselves because they'd made themselves knowledgeable.
Smart.
And I was very impressed, and I can get you promoted. And the social interaction, remember, again, you don't know people's lives, and they may need that social interaction. So don't be an insecure manager and frown on people doing separate Zoom calls. You don't have to be on everything. Have your middle managers, ask them, have you reached out to your team? Have you checked on them? Maybe establish a brief hello session, or whatever you want to call it. You can use the word meeting, but make sure that that people are being engaged and they feel that they're still a part of the team, even though they're in isolation.
Yeah.
This one is one you and I have talked a lot about, Chris, and I won't cover it very much, but it's self-care, because my situation was unique because I retired. But self-care is so important. That's why we were talking about stay on schedule, keep your workouts, hydrate. When you're at home, a lot of times you take, let me say this, you take better care of yourself at work than you do at home.
It's true.
And it's so easy to just get comfortable on the couch. There's a bag of chips in the pantry, and you do those kind of things. So a schedule is so important, and consistency, and maybe even accountability. Even right now, Kristin, on some projects that I'm working on, I have accountability partner and I hold them accountable. They hold me accountable to make sure that I'm making progress on these projects that I'm looking at. So
that's important.
It's very, very important. So take care of yourself if you're working in a remote environment.
Yeah, absolutely.
Final thoughts, Kristin?
No, I think that's huge. I know for me, I had a very strict routine in place before I started working remote. I would get up at 6 a.m., work out, right? I had my whole routine, and I got completely thrown off. I have found something out about myself, and that's that I do best when I'm very busy. And so, to Ron's point, having a schedule when you are working remote or when you are self-employed and you have more flexibility, you have to have that schedule in place. I know for me, homeschooling the kids, I have a schedule in place and we adhere to it. So without that, it'd be a free for all. So I say in all facets of life, put something in place that you need to work with. Give yourself a little grace on days, right? But have the framework done.
I think I took the rebel phase. Like, I started thinking, I've gotten up at 5:36 in the morning, put a suit on, showered, put a suit on, drink my health drink. So I took some liberty there, because you do have to give yourself grace. But I started realizing that I was way more productive if I go to bed earlier, get up earlier, and things like that. So you do you. I always say get a PhD in you, find out what you need. But man, when I'm coaching people and they do the same thing over and over, expecting a different result, it's not going to happen. You're going to get the same result. So, self-care, organization, staying in touch with your team, honoring security, making sure that, your mic is on and off, sticking with time schedule. These things will really separate you from the pack. It will, and also, make sure you don't get in trouble. So I know this episode may not be as exciting as some, but it is so important. And this remote working is the trend that's not going to go away. So you may not be working remotely now, but you might be in the near future.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to tell you, Ron, when I showed myself some grace, I gained 10 pounds. So I'm reeling that in right now.
Kristin,
And it just happens when you break a habit that's working well for you.
I started to use the word husky because on our program
Husky
there
and
was
cantankerous.
on the husky and cantankerous. I don't know if you've noticed yet, but it's in our leadership group on Facebook.
Oh my gosh.
It was about advice to hiring women in the 50s. I would like to clarify, and I was doing a quote, but yeah, that's on the group. So I hope people listen to the entire episode before you judge me.
It's hysterical. Oh, amazing.
All right. You feel good, Kristin?
I do. And I want to thank my brother-in-law, Matt, for suggesting a remote work episode. And he was probably looking for a lot more humor because him and I both have, I would say, a good sense of humor. So, but I think we sprinkled it in. We always have to be solution oriented and not just have fun the whole time. But there are definitely humorous aspects to working remote. We definitely covered that in the beginning. But thank you, Matt, for a great topic.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. It was a great topic. All right, everybody, be the leader you're meant to be.
We'll see you next week.
The Dirty Side of Leadership podcast is brought to you by Forward Operations. If you'd like to book Ron or Kristin for speaking events, training, or executive coaching, visit forwardoperations.com. Be the leader you're meant to be.